Hey guys, this is Safina and you are watching A King's Love Convos. So today I wanted to do something a little bit different and I wanted to do a quick Bible study on the book of Esther. So I have come to fall in love with the book of Esther. Every time that I've heard it being preached, I've always heard it from the vantage point of, Esther being beautiful and, her getting all of these treatments and that's why she became queen. And the popular verse in Esther is, for such a time as this. I've always heard that, but it wasn't until I took the time to study the book for myself that I have grown an appreciation for the entire book and what it meant. So just to give a little bit of backstory, there is a king named Xerxes.
I may be butchering that name, but hopefully you're reading along.
But let's just call him King X, okay? He is the king of Persia. I think it's important to note that the first queen was not Queen Esther. The first queen was Queen Vashti. King X of Persia has this big, beautiful ball. He summons the queen, Queen Vashti, to come and to basically just be a part of the party. I guess he wanted her to prance around. The Bible says that she was extremely beautiful, and so I guess he just wanted to show her off. Long story short, Queen Vashti says no. Doesn't say why she said no. Maybe she didn't feel like it, or maybe she just was offended. Who knows? She said no. The advisors of King X tell him pretty much that she gotta go, because if the women of Persia see the queen disrespecting the king, they are going to think that it's okay to disrespect their husbands. And so they're like, yeah, she needs to go. So she ends up getting dethroned. The Bible doesn't really make much mention of what happens to her afterwards. So she ends up getting dethroned, and now the king is in search for a new queen. He sends out a decree all throughout Persia for all of the young virgin women to come and be a part of his harem and basically figure out who's going to be the next queen. There is a Jew named Mordecai who has a cousin named Esther. Esther becomes a part of this harem, and she finds favor with the officials that King X has put in place to be in charge of the harem. So she gets all of these beauty treatments. She gets all of this pretty much preferential treatment. And the Bible says that basically she found favor. Long story short, Queen Esther becomes queen. Fast forward, there is a time that comes where there is an official that is pretty much right under the king named Hanan. Again, I may be completely butchering that name, but he basically has almost the same power and authority that the king has. And so he feels disrespected by Mordecai because Mordecai wouldn't, I guess, greet him in the way that he wanted to be greeted. And so out of spite, out of his ego, out of pride, he makes a decree to not only kill Mordecai, but to kill every Jew, man, woman, or child all throughout Persia. So there is, grief all throughout Persia of all of the Jews. They're crying. The Bible says Mordecai was roaming the streets in sackcloth and ashes and tears, and sackcloth and ashes was a symbol of grief because of what was to come. Mordecai sends a letter to Esther, which is his cousin, basically saying, hey, can you go before the king and pretty much get this decree reversed? And so this is pretty much the exchange that they have of letters in the conversation that they have. This is Esther's response. All of the king's officials and even the people in the provinces know that anyone who appears before the king in his inner court without being invited is doomed to die unless the king holds out his golden scepter. And the king has not called for me to come to him for 30 days. So basically what Esther is saying is there's rules to going before the king. You can't just go before the king just because. And anybody who did go before the king without being called and without being summoned was put to death. And so she's just like, look, I hear you, but you know, this is how it works. And I have not been summoned by the king, and I don't want to die, so yeah. Mordecai sends a response. He says, "Don't think for a moment that just because you are in the palace that you will escape when all other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps," and this is the most popular phrase, "who knows if perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this." So basically what he's saying here is, don't think that just because you have the title of queen that this decree won't apply to you. Because remember, Mordecai and Esther are related. They're both Jews. No one knew that Queen Esther was a Jew. And so he's saying that just because you're queen, this is going to be applied to you and for your relatives. For you to be silent in a time like this, where your people is scheduled to be killed, know that the deliverance may not come through you, right? Because we're God's chosen people. The deliverance may not come through you, but it's going to come. But perhaps, right? He's pretty much saying, well, think about it. Consider this one thing. Perhaps you were queen for such a time as this. Perhaps God put you in the position to have the authority that you have as queen because he knew that through a series of events there would become a time where your people were set to be persecuted and killed. And so perhaps you're in the position you're in for such a time as this. I love Esther's response after this, because I mean, Mordecai pretty much checked her. And her response is, "Go and gather together all the Jews of Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will do the same. And then though it is against the law, I will go in and see the king." Though it is against the law, I will go in and see the king. And this is the most gangster part where she says, "If I must die, I must die." So she calls a fast that she also participates in, right? And she says pretty much, it is what it is. If I die, let it be. So she ends up going before the king, and she didn't die. The story is actually has a happy ending. The Jews end up being the one to kill everybody. And Mordecai, which is her cousin, ends up being exalted and promoted to just this awesome place of influence. I think this speaks to the sovereignty of God. Esther was not put in the position just because she was cute, just because, you know, she was bad. It was so much bigger than that. Through a series of events, God orchestrated things in a way, even from the very beginning when Queen Vashti got kicked off the throne. You know, she didn't get kicked off because of anything, well, in my opinion. It wasn't anything catastrophic. It was just because she didn't come to a banquet. But even with that, where now that there's a space for a new queen, and you know, this Jewish girl who was a part of a harem probably full of thousands of other women finds favor. This one girl who happens to be a Jew, which is God's people, finds favor and ends up becoming queen. And years later, there is this event that happens where the Jews are set to be persecuted and killed, and her position and the title that she had, God used in order to deliver a nation. So it was so much bigger than a queen being beautiful. It was so much bigger than a queen just having, you know, beauty treatments and going before a king. It was so much bigger than that. And again, I think it speaks to the sovereignty of God, that he is in control of everything. You know, Queen Esther didn't know she was going to become queen. She didn't even know, you know, what was going to happen, where there was this decree that all of the Jews were set to be killed. She didn't know that that was going to happen, you know, especially in the time frame. There's a reason why God had put her in the position that she was in at the time that she was in it, because let's just say there was another queen in place. If there was another queen in place, she may not have had the burden to reverse this decree. She may not have had the burden to stop all of the Jews from being killed. And so God, from beginning to end, is constantly orchestrating things. And the thing is that it's not even about Queen Esther. It's not about her. You know, the purpose for which things happened was for a bigger reason. You know what I'm saying? It was the salvation of thousands of people, for God's people. So it's when God does things and he orchestrates things, it's always bigger than the instrument that he uses. I love that book. Hopefully you read it on your own. Feel free to comment down below and we can talk and we can chat and we can share notes and all of those good things. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully everybody is doing okay right now. I know it's super crazy right now and all of us are bored and things like that, but just know that I'm praying for you. I love you guys so much and I'll see you in my next video.